So if you've watched AI over the last few years, what you might have noticed is that most of the breakthroughs happened around text, images, and content generation. What used to feel impossible now feels completely normal. But here is the thing that started becoming interesting to us at H2O AI. Most of the valuable data inside an organization doesn't look like a paragraph. It doesn't look like a prompt. It looks like rows and columns. And it's still the case for decades. It has been the case. And it's still the case today. Customer records, orders, inventory levels, the data businesses actually run on. And that's where the disconnect appears. Foundation models dramatically simplified how we work with language, but many predictive questions about business data still require specialized workflows, multiple tools, and a lot of patience. The problem isn't a lack of data. Most organizations are drowning in data, as I have said. The problem is the distance between having the data and getting the answer. And that's really the theme of today's discussion. How do we reduce that distance? That's the question. Now, when I say rows and columns, I'm not describing some exotic data set hidden away in a data warehouse. I'm really describing something you've probably worked with already today. What people hear in the world tabular, this sometimes sounds more technical than it really is. But if you've used Excel, Salesforce, a CRM, Google spreadsheet, for example, or a database export, you've already worked with tabular data. And what's interesting isn't that what tabular data is. It's how much of the world's business value is represented in this format. And not to mention across a multitude of industries, all the industries, different terminology, different types of data, but they are all having the same underlying structure. While much of the AI conversation has focused on text, video, audio, many of the decisions that impact revenue, risk, growth, and efficiency still depend on rows and columns. And in many ways, tables remain what I consider the language of business. And I'd like you to remember this picture for a moment. Notice the question marks in the last column here on the slides. In about 20 minutes, we're going to come back to a spreadsheet just like this and watch those missing values get filled live in a matter of fractions of seconds. But first, let's talk about why turning valuable business data into predictions has traditionally been so difficult. And I think that's one of the questions that has been in your mind as well since you have joined. When people hear discussions about tabular foundation models, one of the first questions that comes up is, if machine learning already works, what's the problem they're trying to solve? And that's a fair question. Traditional machine learning can produce excellent results. We have seen them. Maybe if you're working on data science projects, you have seen that already in real life. Many organizations are already using it successfully for forecasting, fraud detection, risk assessment, all sorts of analytics, such as customer analytics, and many other use cases. So this isn't a story about machine learning failing. It's a story about friction. Let's take a relatively simple business question. Which customers are likely to churn next quarter? The question sounds straightforward and direct, but getting to the answer often involves data preparation, feature engineering, model training, evaluation, deployment, monitoring, and maintenance, as you see on the screen. Every step exists here for a reason. Every step adds value. The challenge is that the effort required is often disproportionate to the question being asked. Now, multiply that across dozens of or even hundreds of prediction opportunities inside an organization. Very quickly, the bottleneck stops being ideas. We have plenty of them. It becomes capacity. There are simply more questions than most teams can realistically support. And that's the issue. And that naturally leads us to what I call the prediction gap. The prediction gap is the gap between the questions organizations would like answered and the questions that are practical to answer. What's interesting here is that most organizations already know what information would help them take better decisions. That's true. They know the questions, they have the data, they understand the value. The challenge is that every predictive question comes with a cost in terms of time, in terms of resources, expertise, infrastructure, coordination, collaboration, you name it. Eventually, something predictable happens. Organizations focus on a relatively small number of predictive projects, while many potentially valuable questions never get explored at all. Not because they aren't important. We know they are important. Not because the data doesn't exist. We know data exists in the majority of the cases. But because obtaining the prediction requires too much effort. Is that simple or that complicated, as a matter of fact, in this case? And that's really the opportunity. If we can reduce the cost of asking predictive questions, organizations can start exploring far more possibilities than they can today. That's why tabular foundation models are attracting so much attention nowadays. They have the potential to narrow the distance between business questions and the business answers I was talking earlier.